Welcome back to another installment of Dream Chasers Ground Zero, everyone. Today I have with us Anthony Vicino. Anthony, would you mind just telling us a little bit about what your personal Ground Zero moment was like for you and how it shaped you into who you are and some of the things that you learned along the way that helped you to get to where you are today?
Yeah, so my ground zero moment was probably my fiance left me and I was living in the back of a van, homeless and $80,000 in debt and had a really bad dead end job, not knowing what I was going to do from that point forward. So that was definitely the ground zero moment where it's like, okay, we can only go up from here.
Yeah, 100%. And that's actually what we like to say around here a lot is that, this is ground zero. There's nowhere to go from here but up. I can't believe I say that so much and then just mess it up. But anyway, hearing about that sort of like rock bottom experience, I just kind of want to ask, like, recognizing you were in a dead end job and, living out of a van, tons of debt. What did you kind of do from there? What was maybe the first step that you took, like after recognizing the fact that like this is not where I want to be? What do you think is the first thing that you did to start kind of pulling yourself out of that rut?
So before that ground zero moment was interesting is like, if you rewind about a year before that, I've been a professional rock climber for a number of years leading up to that moment. And that sounds like a really glamorous thing, but it really just means I was living in the back of a van more days than not, living like climbing mountains and generally not making a ton of money, but living a life of freedom and expression and just getting to travel where I wanted, when I wanted. But, you know, a year before I was living in the back of the van broke and, single suddenly was the moment when I went to the woman that I asked to marry me. I went to her parents and said, "Hey, can I marry your daughter?" And they said, "Well, how are you going to provide for her?" And so that was like the ground zero mini moment where at that point I was like, well, what am I doing with my life that is going to be able to provide a meaningful, stable living situation for myself or for anybody else around me? And I went back to the well and says like, okay, what can I do to make some money? And I started writing science fiction and fantasy novels in particular, because I'd always been a passion just writing and telling stories. It was something that my dad had like fostered in me. And it was something that when I went to college, I actually went thinking I'm going to be an author. And then I never did anything with it until that moment. And so a year later, the timing of it's really interesting. I was publishing my first book. First book went live, and then my fiance ended things, and then I was living in the back of a van. So I had achieved the one goal and had kind of like blown up the other goals. And so at that moment, then you're at this inflection point where you can look and say, well, we're going to continue on the path and just keep writing our way out of this, or like just kind of wallow and spiral out of control. And for me, I just leaned into the writing and kept publishing. And so in that next 2 to 3 year window, I published another 10 novels and just kind of wrote my way out of that really, I wouldn't say a horrible situation, but a situation I hadn't really planned or expected to put myself in. Like when you're a little kid, you don't like think about your life and think, well, I'm going to be homeless in the back of a van someday. But once you're there, it's like, you only have two options. You can either do nothing or you can do something. And so I did something. I just kept doing what I was doing at that point. And then there come this inflection point, this opportunity that kind of presented itself when a friend came to me one day and said, "Hey, would you like to help me build this business?" And that was a window washing company. And I said, sure, because I know nothing about washing windows or building businesses, but that sounds fun. It's a new challenge. Let's try it out. And so we went into business, and, we have a unique skill set as former rock climbers and a good network of people who are comfortable on ropes. And so that was our unique value proposition in the market, was we can wash windows better than anybody else because we can get in places nobody else is comfortable getting. And so we built that company, and I realized like, oh, I actually really like building businesses. This is a lot of fun. This is cool. So just kept doing that. Like, started like went into business with a buddy and built a manufacturing company. And now I'm in real estate and building companies around that. But, I think a lot of that ground zero and kind of building your way out of it is being open to the possibility of like whatever the universe is going to present itself. And I think when you're young, you don't know where you're ultimately going to end up. And honestly, even now, I have no idea where I'm ultimately going to end up. So I think you just have to be adaptable and present to all the the potential opportunities that can present themselves, because they're out there. They just might not. One of the really interesting things is that opportunity very rarely looks like opportunity at the moment. Like when you're in there, you're like, that doesn't look like an opportunity. That looks like a bad idea, or it looks like something entirely different. And so you have to be really open-minded, especially when you're young, and being willing to try and dabble in a lot of things, and being willing to fail a lot too, because that's we were talking about that before we went live. That's just an integral part of realizing any kind of success, is being persistent enough to not give up through all the myriad failures that will present themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I know for me, I can definitely say, kind of going through my own personal ground zero, I had a lot of issue with, there was a lot going on emotionally and in my life at that time, that it was extremely hard to stay focused on one thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I really struggled. And then hearing from you, like, you have to be open to the universe presenting itself. And for the longest time, I fought and fought and fought, because I felt like that the moment I was in was not an opportunity. It felt like some sort of attack, or I felt like depressed, or whatever exactly you want to call it. It didn't feel like an opportunity for me. It felt like a low. And I mean, and that's what it was, but I didn't recognize where the opportunity lied within that, because as you said, opportunity often doesn't look like opportunity. And what it ended up presenting itself as was, I didn't realize it for, like I said, a very long time. But what it turned out to look like is that huge deficit in my life, that huge emotional loss, turned out to be the biggest opportunity in my life. And it really propelled me, launched me into this whole new opportunity that I never saw coming, to this whole new life that I never even knew that I wanted, until, like you said, it just all of a sudden was there. And then my whole perception of my entire world changed, and all of a sudden I had new goals, a new passion, a new energy, a new drive, all these new things that I never thought were going to come back. I had lost what mattered the most to me, and then all of a sudden, boom, here I was, and it was just this whole new world of things that I never knew were coming. And that's where I just really related to what you were saying. Like, you have to be open to whatever really the universe is going to throw at you. And that's where me, in that moment, I was at my most probably vulnerable, but I was ready for something new. And that's where it came. And then off to the races we went.
One of the hardest things is identity, like the identities that we form around ourselves and who we think we are as people. And we identify around certain things. So like, oh, I'm a professional athlete, or I'm a really good student, or I'm this, or I'm that. And we get locked into that mentality, and it makes it really hard then to ever see ourselves in a way outside of that. And so a large part of success, and like being around a lot of successful people, the thing I've realized is that they have very fluid identities. They're not locked into, this is what I do, therefore this is who I am. It's very different. It starts with, this is who I am, and therefore these are the things that I can do. And it starts from, shifting that perspective a little bit. But I think, an interesting study that came out from IBM a number of years ago, they were asking all these CEOs, what's the most valuable skill set in the marketplace these days? And the overwhelming answer that came back was creativity. And creativity is a really interesting concept, because when you hear that term, most people think like, oh, painting or music or singing, like whatever, like artistic expression. But that's not really like that's not the technical definition of creativity that I want to use here, which is, creativity, as I define it, is the ability to combine two or more pieces of disconnected informations and combine them in new, novel, functional ways. So your ability to take information and combine them, that's what creativity is. And at its core, if you want to see opportunities, if you want to find those opportunities, it has to be coming from a place of looking at what's in front of you, and then taking all the information that you have and coming at it from tangential angles, so that you can break it down and see that opportunity for what it is. And if you really want to, like, I would say, separate yourself from the rest of the crowd, it will be based off of your ability to find and execute on opportunities. And so it's a weird thing to think, like, how do you hone and build creativity? And that's a hard question. There's some tactics for that, but I would say when you're young, that should be the thing that you are the most focused on, is how do I build that creative muscle?
Absolutely. I mean, you're killing it so far, man. I just want to say that right now.
Oh,
But
thanks.
but yeah, I definitely identify with the identity piece, because that's really where I was. My entire life, I was a basketball player. That was my identity. That's who I was when I came to college. That's what people knew me as. I was the kid on the basketball team. Like, And that's who I was. And then in stepping away from that, I didn't know who I was. And I was like, well, now what the hell am I going to do? Like, where do I go? What do I do? What other skills do I even have? But I had put so much time into that, that was the only place I truly felt comfortable, that I felt that my skills that I had worked on were strong and that I felt confident. So in putting so much time into that, I didn't feel confident anywhere else because I wasn't working on those other skills. I was always focused on basketball, and that was my thing. And then in losing that, I lost all that confidence. I lost everything. And that's where, like you said, you really had to, that was my ground zero. I had to start all over. I didn't know what I wanted to do, where I was going, any of it. And then, like I said, the universe throws you into a situation, and then all of a sudden, that's your aha moment. Like for me, it was, meeting a mentor, and it just really led me down this other path that is so much more aligned with things I want out of my life and things I want to do than anything was prior to that. But I had to lose basketball to realize that. And that's one of the things that I always struggled to realize, because I didn't want to let go of that. That was my identity. That was what I identified with. And that was what I loved my entire life and wanted to hold on to so tight. And then I had to lose that to find something else. And I didn't think I was going to find anything bigger than that ever, but I did. And that's where, like you said, you really just kind of have to surrender yourself to opportunity and let those things happen, and let yourself in, let yourself be shaped into a new you, to then, make the most of new opportunities and a new identity that could possibly be more aligned with you than you even realize.
One of the hardest parts about the giving up the identity is, so you have your two most valuable assets, really, like that you could invest in, is yourself and your network. Those are the things. And one of the really hard things about making an identity shift away from, like, I'm a basketball player, is you're losing on both of those fronts. One is the identity that you had as a person out there dribbling and shooting the ball, right? But then the other part of it is all the connections, all the people that you know, they're deep in that basketball world. And so when you step away from that identity, there's a little bit of an abandonment, where the people that you're walking away from, they're like, well, screw you, you're leaving me, like, I got no time for you. And maybe it's not even that malicious. Maybe it's just, hey, like, our lives are going in different places. And that's hard, because simultaneously you're wrestling with shifting your own identity, but you're shifting this fact that the social network, the people that you used to rely on, or the people that you love, they're not going to help you get to where you want to go next. And that's not a knock on them, because you're no longer going to be able to help them get to where they're trying to go to, like, depending. And so sometimes these relationships, they change and they grow, and that is scary and hard. And it's probably the main reason, even more so than, like, the self-identity that we have. It's the main reason most people don't pursue change, is because they don't want to leave their friends and their family behind, or they're afraid of what they'll think or judge them. And that's super hard. And there's no clear answer for that. I had a kid the other day reach out, and he's like, I'm a professional rock climber right now. He's like, I don't know what to do with my life from this point forward. And, and I was like, well, what do you want to do? And he's like, well, I want to make money. And I was like, well, here's the thing that I learned the hard way, unfortunately. And, like, my network in rock climbing, great people, not a lot of money making people, though. They're people that value time and freedom, and they'd want to spend their time out in the woods. And we, I use the term dirtbag, like, with a lot of love in my heart, because I was a dirtbag for a decade. But that's not the network that's going to help you if you want to make money, and I'm not saying, like, money making is a good thing or a bad thing. It's just, if that's what your goal is, like, you have to look at your network and say, like, is this going to help me get to my goal? And unfortunately, like, that network isn't going to be super helpful. So you have to start building that next network very intentionally, of, like, who's going to help you get to there. And that all seems like very Machiavellian, like, we don't want to think about our relationships in such a transactional way. But if you're not looking at them in like at least a little bit of a transactional way of, like, why are the people around you in your life, then you're probably just allowing people into your life randomly. And I find that a random life is not a life that's going to get you to the destination you probably have in your heart.
Absolutely. I know, I you're really hitting it right on the head so far, as everything that I went through, because I felt like such an outcast beyond that point, where I didn't feel like I identified with that crowd anymore. So I lost my identity as well as my crowd, and I felt extremely alone, and I didn't know what to do or where to go. And that's, like, it was just a really kind of bad time for me. But 100% that just, I didn't feel like I wasn't comfortable going to those guys anymore, and that they didn't come to me anymore. And it was like, you lost all of that. And it's like, just that, now what, how do you rebuild? And that's where, I really had to kind of sit in that and really look deeper into myself and try to find out what truly mattered to me, what I truly wanted out of my life, and then what I needed to do to get there. And for me, that was, I wanted to build wealth. I wanted to, make money, get my family out of the situations that we were in, and, grow from there. And in researching that, real estate came up. So then I started to study real estate. And then that led me to, a couple of, presentations on real estate, one of which Adam Carswell was presenting. I met him there, reached out to him, and the snowball began, and now here we are doing all these other things. And like I said, it's just, I never would have known that that's where I was going. And that's where I like to keep kind of reiterating what you led there at the beginning with, is just surrender yourself to that opportunity, because I didn't know it was coming, but had I not opened myself up to a new opportunity, I never would have found it either. So that's where I think the true power in that is.
It's the most core human fear, is abandonment and being exiled from the tribe. Because if you think about it from an evolutionary standpoint, when we're out there on the savannah, we're just a bunch of, hairless monkeys with no claws. We don't do very well when we're separated from the group. And so if there's any reason that we're kicked out of the group, that pretty much means death in the wild. And so that's hardwired into our genetics, is don't be outcast, because outcast equals death. And so we try to fit in, and we do whatever it takes to stay in the tribe. But that tribe, sometimes you have to outgrow it and you have to move on to the next tribe. And that can be very scary. But in the modern era, the consequences of leaving the tribe, they might still feel like life and death, but they're not anymore. You're not going to die out there in the wilderness. There is an opportunity for you to go and find the next tribe and fit into that, but it doesn't feel like that in the moment. And so this is why people, they stay exactly where they are with their, they stay in their high school town, and they stay with their high school friends, and they drink every Tuesday. They have bowling club on Thursdays, and all, they just get into these routines because they're so afraid of what happens if I step outside of this tribe. And the coolest thing about the time and era that we live in right now is that it's an era of infinite upside and very limited downside. There's very few things that you can realistically do to screw up your life beyond all measure. Don't get arrested, don't get into drugs, and avoid financial ruin. That's kind of it. And don't get killed. As long as you stay alive, stay out of jail, you're doing okay. And so the consequences of messing up are so low, but the potential upside is so high that there's no reason not to be taking those swings at bat, because especially when you're young, you could do nothing with and this is a good point. You could do literally nothing until you're 30, start the game fresh, and you still crush it before you're 40. That's pretty much what I did. I didn't start down my path until I was about 28, 29. Before that, it was all complete wash. I was like $80,000 in debt by the time I was 28, and by the time I was 32, I was over $1 million in net worth. And you can turn these things around. And so when you're young, you're coming out of college, it might feel like you got to do it now, but you got a lot of time to play with. So I would say maximize for opportunity is really what you need to be doing at that young age. Or don't, just go ahead and have fun. That's okay too.
Yeah. I mean, I really like your point there that while it is important, you still have time, and how you choose to spend that is kind of up to you. But either way, the potential downside is not outweighing the potential upside. So say you make a mistake here, or in a couple of years, or wherever it is, you still have time to fully right that and fully live out whatever that goal is for you. So
yeah, if that goal is to, if your goal is to live in a tent like I did for a decade, cool, go do it. If it's to go and make a ton of money, cool, you go do that too. If you want to go and play in a band for 5 years, then just travel and maybe make a thing of it. But I don't know. The only things that you end up regretting really at the end of life are the things that you didn't do, the opportunities you didn't take. Very rarely when you talk to somebody, do they regret oh, I did this and it blew up and I really regret it. It's not those things that people look back on with regret. They look back and say what if I had done that? What if I had just gotten over the fear? What if I'd just been a little bit braver to try that thing, to ask that girl out, to, go take that opportunity to go live in that new country just for a little bit? And like, those are the things that you'll look back on. So especially when you're young, like maximize your opportunities to avoid regret. That's what I would say, is like, when you're faced with two decisions, like think about, this is actually kind of funny. I talk about myself in three persons. I talk about past Anthony, current Anthony, and future Anthony. And I don't care about past Anthony. Like, he's dead, he's gone. And current Anthony, his only job is to make it so that future Anthony doesn't hate him. And so future Anthony, I think about like, okay, in 20 years, if I look back on this moment right now, am I gonna hate the decision that I made right now? And if the answer is yes, then probably don't do that. But if the answer is no, then like, I need to make that decision.
Well, I mean, I surely hope that you don't look back on this moment in 20 years and wish that you didn't do it. But yeah, so just thinking about like, if we have any listeners on here right now that are, going through what we like to call a ground zero moment, and they're in hearing what you're saying, they're deciding, you know what, like, yeah, I'm over this. Like, it's time for me to do something more and commit to finding a new solution and commit to just whatever it is getting out of this situation that I'm in and moving to something else. What would you say to them, other than obviously the point that you just made? Let me think of a better way to word this. Obviously, getting out of the situation that they're in would probably be the biggest hurdle at first, just deciding that it's time to move on, let go of whatever it is and open yourself to new opportunity. But then the next step, as like for you, you said you had to leave that tribe, you had to pursue a new opportunity. What would you say to that demographic, just to avoid like whatever that next roadblock is? So you finally decided like, it's time for me to move. What was that next roadblock for you after you decided that it was time to move on, new opportunity, leave the tribe that you're in? What would you say that next hurdle was for you?
So it always starts, with a dream, and then you have to figure out how to execute against the dream. I always say that $1 million idea is worthless without $1 million execution. And that's the issue that a lot of people run into, is like, I want to have a better life. Okay, that's cool. What do I do now? Like, I'm not very good at things. Okay, well, go get good at things. That's step 2, right? Like, have the vision and then figure out what you need to work on to start executing that vision. And for most people, that's going to be skill set, and that's going to be network. Those are going to be the two of the biggest limiting factors. So network is a hard one to go and build, especially when you're young, in an intentional way where you don't really know what you're going to be doing. Like, what you really want to take as many opportunities as possible when you're young, to try as many different things, because you just don't know what you're going to be good at. You don't know what you're going to love. You think you do, but you don't. So try a lot of things and really invest in those relationships, because the people around you, it's like compounding interest. We talk about all the time, invest early and young, and by the time you're 50, you'll be a gazillionaire, because $10 invested when you're 20 is worth, $1 million later. I don't know. So, but it applies for social capital too. Put the time and energy into the people around you to get to know them, really maintain relationships. If you're coming out of college, those are some of the most valuable relationships you'll ever have, but only if you maintain them. And most people don't. They don't have a strategy for like keeping in touch with people and staying relevant, letting them know what they're working on and being interested in what the other person's involved in. So that's one step. The other part then is really work on your skills. Really work on acquiring as many different skill sets as you can, figure out what you're good at, and then work on those things. Don't worry about the things that you suck at. Don't try and be good at everything. Don't try and be passing. You're trying to find the 2 to 5 things that you're so good at that if you were to spend 10,000 hours on, you could be the best at. And so figure out what those skills are. And 2 skills in particular, everybody needs to have, and most people unfortunately don't have, is the ability to learn and the ability to think clearly. Now, the reason I say most people don't have those abilities is because they've never really spent the time to figure it out for themselves. We come from an education system that teaches everybody the same way. Like, this is how you need to learn. I'm lecturing you and you read out of this book. And that's not really the answer for most people. I don't know what your way of learning is. For me, it's reading. I can read something and I got it. And I learn really well with my body. So those are the things. If I need to learn something, that's how I do it. You need to figure out how you learn and then make it a daily practice to keep learning something new every single day. The other part of that then is learning how to think clearly. And the reason most people don't know how to do that is because they've never had to. Nobody's ever sat them down and said, Aaron, tell me your thoughts on this topic. And until we have that conversation, you've probably never thought about whatever the topic is. Like I could say, tell me what you think about World War II. And unless you're like a World War II historian, like you've probably never really thought about it deeply, right? And so to develop that muscle, the most valuable tool that you have is writing. Learn to write. And this doesn't have to be in writing in public. This is writing for yourself in a journal. Make a daily writing habit, because writing is the slowest, most concrete form of thinking that we have. You're taking the chaos inside of your head and you're making it manifest. And it's not until it's down on the paper a lot of times that you start to go, oh, that's what I think on that. Or that's what I thought, but actually I don't agree with this. And so taking that jumble from inside your brain and focusing it, you're going to come to some realizations about what you think and what you feel about the world and on different topics that most people have never spent the time to think about. And so this could be a daily practice of like 20, 30 minutes of just journaling, finding a topic and saying, what do I think about inflation? Or what do I think about, bubbly water? It could be whatever. Just find topics and find reasons to express like your thoughts on the topic. And this is why like podcasts like this are really interesting for us. Because for us, we're talking, we're having a conversation, and through this conversation, we're getting to try to congeal our thoughts into something. But if you're listening to this at home, you're just a passive participant right now. You're just consuming our thoughts. You're not contributing anything to the conversation, but you can, if you were to put us on pause right now, pull out a piece of paper and say, what do I think about what Anthony just shared there? What do I think about writing? Is this really important? Is he full of shit? I don't know. So you got to find ways to not just passively consume other people's thoughts. You have to find a way to create your own. And so that's all kind of a ramble and a random jumble of thoughts. But I think if I was starting out and somebody put me aside and like gave me that feedback, and then I had actually started implementing, I think I would have been a lot further ahead earlier on in life than I am now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, maybe it was a few different thoughts in one there, but I think there was some seriously valuable nuggets in there. So 100%, don't worry about that at all.
Hey man, life isn't linear. Life is a ramble. Sometimes you gotta kind of ramble through things to figure out where you're going.
100%. So I'm just kind of trying to take it all in right now. You've really dropped some great stuff today. Some of this, even for me, like I can sit here and think like, if only I had been doing that a little bit sooner, or if only and I'm still young, so it's also hard to look at it that way.
Yeah.
So it's like, it is what it is. I'm just like thinking about it at the same time. I mean, just that
the thing. That's the thing that everybody gets so tripped up on is like, oh, if only I'd started that sooner. So many people start with that and then they let that end there. If only I'd started sooner. Like, okay, well, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The next best time is today. So what? You could have started 10 years ago and you could have been way better than you are now. What are you going to do about it? That's past you, and past you doesn't matter anymore. All that matters is current you and what future you is going to think of current you's decisions. So that's all you got to live up to.
Yeah. I mean, in my personal experience, I would say that creativity follows commitment. And for me, like the definition that you provided for creativity earlier, I actually really liked, about the power of being able to take two ideas and bring them together and connect things outside in the world. And for me, I'd say that's pretty much how it worked, because I just got to the point that I was like so fed up with what I was doing, where I was mentally, physically, all of it, that I was just like, I have to get out of this. I'm over it. Like something has to change. And I committed to that. This was me saying, well, I don't know what it looks like, but at this point in time, I'm going to find something else. I'm going to find better for me. I don't like where I'm at. And then in making that commitment, that's where the creativity began, because I committed to finding a new solution. And that's when the ideas started to become apparent. The things that I saw out in the world that like, oh, I actually like doing that, or I like the way they did this, or like finding those new things that I enjoyed doing or wanted to do, or new interests, or whatever that looked like, whether that be books, videos. I mean, you can get lost on YouTube or any of those things, but whatever that looked like, that's where the creativity came from, because I started to recognize all of those things out in the world that I truly enjoyed doing before or outside of basketball, because all of my focus was just on that one big massive glob of emotion, I guess you could say,
Mm-hmm.
that I wasn't able to focus on anything else. And like I said, in making that commitment to find something new, to leave that behind and open myself up to something new, that's where that creativity came from for me. Because like I said, I was able to start recognizing all those other things. And I started to realize that I didn't hate speaking. I didn't hate reading. I didn't hate doing any of these things that I really hadn't done before, but I had just put them on the back burner before because basketball was my thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where, I mean, and I know I've spoke about it before, but like, I never liked reading because I never got to read what I wanted to read. I always
Mm-hmm.
had to read what somebody was telling me to read, or I always had to do a report or talk or give a speech or some sort of play or something on what I was being told to do. I didn't necessarily get to go and just have conversations like this with somebody about the topic that I wanted to talk about. And like, I mean, and in high school or things like that, like most of the time that those conversations are girls drinking, whatever, like same thing with college. Like they're not exactly productive conversations anyway. But what I'm saying is like, that like those things, like you have to let go of whatever that I'm trying to think of a good way to word it, that like basketball for me was that thing and I had to let go of it before I could open myself up to those other things. And a lot of you guys that may be in your own ground zero moment right now, there's something that you got to let go of. And I know it's difficult, trust me, I went through it, but in order for me to find where I wanted to go beyond that point, you have to let go of what that is. And your creativity is going to follow. But sometimes you have to subtract from your life to add to your life. And that is exactly what happened for me because I had to lose that overwhelming thing to find the new possibilities for me.
Mm-hmm. It's the anchor. It's holding you in place, and that's a good thing when you're seeking security. It makes you feel safe. You're not going to float off into the unknown, but you're also not going to go anywhere. The anchor is going to keep you there. And so you have to, if you're going to set off for, exotic, unseen, exciting new shores, you have to lift the anchor and move on. And that's terrifying. But what you mentioned there, it reminds me of the idea that necessity is the mother of all invention. And one of the things that people get wrong about creativity a lot of times is they think constraints are going to make it harder for them to be creative. And what you're talking about there about commitment, decision, the root of the word decision really means to cut off from all other possibilities and commit to a particular path. And we don't like that as humans because we like to keep our options open, as many of them as possible, because that feels safe and secure and feels like optionality is a good thing. But as long as you have infinite potentiality, you're not going to actually make any progress. You have to choose a destination and start moving towards it to actually get there. And so constraint actually aids creativity. And the example of that is if I was to ask you right now, Aaron, tell me a story, you'd be like, let me think. Okay, I'll tell you a story. That might take you a little bit. But if I said, hey, tell me about the happiest memory you ever had with your dad or with your grandma or whoever, like now you're like, oh, okay, I'm focused. Like I have the constraints now to be creative within that. And that seems like really confusing, like almost like I don't even know the word. It feels like a paradox maybe. But the thing that I found is by creating those constraints, it actually frees you to be even more creative. And so whether that's with writing or if that's like with skill acquisition or thinking about what's going to come next for you in your life, like create those constraints, give yourself time deadlines, give yourself commitment deadlines with people around you, like find ways to constrain yourself because it's within that you really get to unlock.
100%. I mean, a lot of people that I know, I mean, and even in my personal experience, a lot of people don't enjoy procrastination and a lot of people abolish procrastination and tell you how terrible it is. But in my personal experience, procrastination is where I work at my best. And I mean, maybe that's just me. I'm sure there's somebody else out there that relates to that. But as you just said, like when I put that constraint on myself, like here's, whatever it is, whether that's a due date for a paper or whatever that constraint, deadline, whatever it is, putting that in place allows me to truly just zero in on whatever it is. And I can just focus on that. And it's because I know I have to block everything else out to get that done within that period of time. And that's where I'm really able to do my best work in those scenarios because that is what I'm focused on. I have to do that or I won't get it done or I won't finish it or it won't be my best or whatever that looks like. But I have to put that in place because otherwise I will be focusing on other things. And I'll say, oh, it's okay that I don't get this done right now, or it's okay that this doesn't happen or whatever, or that this isn't my best. Like you have to put that in place to one, hold yourself accountable, but also just because it helps you focus. Like that's my biggest thing is because I mean, I'm terrible for it. I'll tell you that I procrastinate everything, but it allows me to truly block the rest of the world out and focus on those things and make sure that they get done. And it's like, it's kind of a backwards reverse engineered way to get things done. I will tell you that it's not the most efficient, but it works for me. And yeah.
No, I mean, I think it's Parkinson's law. It says something to the effect that the amount of time a task takes to complete is directly correlated to the amount of time you give to complete it. So if you give yourself 8 hours to write that paper, it's going to take all 8 hours, guaranteed. If you only give yourself an hour, it's going to take an hour. That's just how it is, right? Like, so really think about that. Creating time constraints is really valuable. If you really want to be productive, that's step one, is to block things off on your calendar and say, this is when I'm doing this thing, and only let yourself take that time. The other way of really, I would say, boosting your productivity is finding external accountability and telling people, I am going to have this done by this time. Because if you can't keep your promise to yourself first, you got to work on that, because, you know, self-esteem is a reputation that you have with yourself. And if you break your promises to yourself, you're not off to a good start in the day. But let's say you have really low self-esteem and you don't really care what you think about yourself. Well, find somebody whose opinion you do care about, tell them what you're working on, and have them hold you accountable.
Yeah, I mean, I think the buddy system can work really well if utilized correctly. You got to find that, like you said, that force of somebody that, you know, cares about you, in the sense that they will hold you to that, knowing that you have to get whatever that is done, or you have to make that change. I mean, maybe it's getting up and working out in the morning, like whatever that looks like. It could be anything, whether it's a schoolwork, working out, going to the gym, whatever that looks like. Just having somebody that can tell you, like, you're not getting better and that it's going to affect you. Because if your inner voice isn't doing it, then, like you said, you need to work on that. But at the same time, like, find somebody that, if they said that one of those things to you, that you're not getting better or you're not going down a good path, whatever it is, that it's going to affect you, that you're going to feel it, that it's going to then be ingrained in you, and you're going to repeat that over and over in your head, and then turn that into your new motivation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you got to find people who don't just, you know, push you to be better, but that pull you to it, where you look at them and you're like, oh God, I want to be like that person so much. I respect them. I want them to think highly of me, like, for whatever reason. Like, I'm not saying that you need to live your life caring what other people think necessarily, but we do have people that we respect, that we look up to in ways. And when you surround yourself with people who are striving to be their best, it's inspiring. And it kind of opens the door for you to say, like, maybe I could be my best too. And so those are the people, if you can find them, that's so much more powerful than just somebody who's trying to push you to the next level. Because as soon as they stop pushing, you're not going to make any more progress. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and for me, that kind of reminds me of, like, the tribe example that we were talking about earlier. Some of you guys need to get out of that tribe, because that's the example that you're seeing. That's the standard that you're being held to. And it's not pushing you to get any better. Like,
and you know who you are out there right now. You know.
Exactly. I mean, I was one of those people. I'll be honest with you. I was one of those people, because, like you said, I was so afraid to be pulled out of that, because I didn't know what was beyond that. But I also knew I wasn't getting any better for staying where I was. And eventually that's, you know, that conflict came to a point that a decision had to be made. You can either do something or not. And yeah. So like I said, a lot of you guys need to, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say that, you know, one of the pivotal moments in my life was around this idea of internal greatness, and how we all believe that we have this greatness inside of us. Nobody thinks they're average, right? Like, everybody thinks they're an above average lover, and everybody thinks they're above average driver. It's crazy, right? Like, we all think that there's greatness inside of us, and to an extent that's true. And whether or not it's great in the macro sense, it's true to you. And you know when you're not moving towards that greatness, when you're not manifesting it, when you're just kind of procrastinating or putting off, or you're just not living up to your highest ideals. You know that, and you sense it in the sense, like, frustration and resentment and anger and all these negative emotions. And so if that's you, if you feel that, if you feel like this malaise when it comes to life, it's because you're not living in alignment with that greatness, that gift that's inside of you. And you know that. And so we're a lot like that myth of the shark that drowns when they stop swimming forward. Humans, we have two directions. We're either moving forward or we're moving backwards, but we're never standing still. And the way to really internalize and think about this is a concept that Maslow made famous, which is the +1 framework. So imagine you're standing on a road, and in front of you, off in the distance, there's all these road signs that say +1, +1, +1, +1. And behind you, all the signs say -1, -1, -1. And every moment is an opportunity to make a decision. Every decision is an opportunity to either move forward +1 or move backwards -1. And your best, ideal, greatest self is always making the +1 decision. And you can't catch them because you're just human and you're going to make a mistake and you're going to move backwards sometimes. And when you move backwards, that's not just moving back one, but that's actually denying you the opportunity cost of moving forward one. So you're actually two behind your greatest self, right? And you can let that either frustrate you and get you down and you give up, or you just say, okay, here's where I am. On the next decision, I'm going to make the +1. I'm going to make the next +1 decision. And if you live every decision, every moment through that framework, you're no longer keeping the total tally. It doesn't matter if you're at a +1,000 or +10,000. What matters is the forward movement, the progress. And as long as you're making that, people feel better. They have higher levels of life satisfaction and contentment. And so focus on the decisions that are in front of you right now. If you're not happy, if you're feeling depressed and sad, focus on what are the next decisions that you can make that would make you feel like you're having progress, that you're making that +1 decision.
No, I love that. I really do. I mean, and that reminds me of the saying, 1 step forward, 2 steps back. Because like, if you make that decision where you feel like you're moving backwards, you lose that step forward, and then you take a step backwards from where you are. So in all reality, like, that whole thing puts it right into a frame that nobody ever understood what that meant. But there you go, because you lose your forward momentum and you take a step backwards. So either take your 1 step forward or you move 2 steps back. And I mean, that's really it. That's the ultimatum, where you have to decide that's your crossroads. You have to decide which one you're going to take and what you're going to do with your day and what you're going to do to either move yourself forward or move yourself backwards. I mean, like you said, you're never going to be perfect, but as long as you can consciously recognize what you're doing is either moving you forwards or backwards, that's definitely going to help you recognize that opportunity cost into what you're doing or saying, or, you know, whatever you're doing throughout your day, and where that's taking you in regards to whatever that goal is for yourself.
One of the most powerful daily habits that I implemented, this was a really long time ago, is I set all these alarms to go off randomly on my phone throughout the day. And they were accompanied with the question, what's my outcome? And so randomly these alarms would go off and they would say, what's my outcome? And it would stop me from whatever it is that I'm doing in that moment. It was just a pattern interrupt that would then give me the opportunity to reflect, why am I doing this thing that I'm doing? And sometimes that alarm would go off and I was in the middle of writing a book, and I'm like, I'm writing this book because it's part of my legacy. This is part of my dream. And it's like, cool, keep doing that. Sometimes it would interrupt me in the middle of driving to the coffee shop. It's like, wait, why am I doing this? Why didn't I just have coffee at home? Was this really necessary? Or maybe it catches me scrolling YouTube. And it's like, wait a minute. What am I doing here? Because we get caught in these rabbit holes so easily, and it's because we lose focus, we become complacent, we lack intentionality. And so just a simple pattern interrupt of throughout the day of stopping and saying, why am I doing what I'm doing right now? That can make all the difference, just to stopping the downslide, or the what would you call it, like the slippery slope downward, and getting you to gain some traction to start moving forward again. Because if you're moving backwards in life, step one isn't to just go and make 100, like +100 decision right away. It's just to stop the backwards motion. Just stop sliding back and start there. And once you've done that, once you stabilized, okay, now let's start moving forward.
100%. I love that too. I mean, yeah, you really gave us a bunch of golden nuggets today. I really love what we've talked about in all of our conversations so far, and extremely powerful, man. I mean, in your story and everything that you've told, and there's lots of actionable stuff in here, guys. I mean, I'm going to be going back through this one, so I hope you are too. Lots of things to pick up and start implementing into your life to, you know, either carry yourself through whatever situation you're in right now, or to just get better. Who knows? You know, there's a bunch of stuff that you can take from this and just continue to move forward. But I do suppose it's about time to start winding it down. I know I've taken up a bunch of your time already. So, One question that I always like to ask everybody at the end of our episodes, and I'm not sure how you'll answer this one, but I'm curious how you'll answer this one. It's just that if you could turn back time and have a conversation with your 18, 22, or your just ground zero self, what do you think you would tell yourself in that conversation?
Oh, that's such a hard one. I don't know if it even matters, because I don't think 18-year-old me would have listened regardless. All the information was out there. People were already telling me all the things I already know now. Like, it just was a matter of implementing it. So I don't know if there's anything that would fundamentally change that. But I would say one of the most valuable things that I've learned in my life is that happiness at the end of the day is really just about love, and it's about the relationships that you have around you. It's not about the achievements. You know, when I was young, I was very achievement oriented, and I still am. I'm very goal oriented. Like, I like to be the best at everything that I do. I want to win at all costs. But for a lot of my life, that achievement was filled with a lack of fulfillment, because it was just empty achievement for the sake of winning, but it wasn't tied to anything better. And it took me a long time to figure out how to tie that in my mind to a larger outcome that led to fulfillment. And a lot of that stems from the relationships and the people around you. And that was something when I was younger, I didn't put enough time and credence into. I didn't invest enough into the people that I cared about, whether they're friends or family. And as you get older, that's going to be the thing that it's really everything. At the end of the day, when you talk to people who are in their 80s or 90s or on their deathbed, it's like, and they're lonely and they're sad, like that's everything. And so I would say really focus on the relationships around you. Don't get so caught up in the money, because money is really just a tool. And it doesn't matter if you have all the tools in the world. It matters what you're building with it. And so the best thing you can build is the relationships and the impact that you have on the lives of people around you.
100%, man. You killed it today. I really appreciate you coming on. Like I said earlier, just tons and tons of value in this one. So once again, I just want to thank you for, taking the time out of your day and be willing to share with us your experience, as well as all these golden nuggets along the way. Definitely some stuff for me to implement from this. So I definitely think our viewers are going to get a ton of value out of this as well. But yeah, like I said, just thank you again. Can't thank you enough for being willing to come on. And with that, everybody, always remember, this is ground zero and there's nowhere to go from here but up.
I love it. Thanks, man.